Welcome to Whispers to a Bride, where we talk about the stuff no one else is talking about. We are going deep on the emotional aspects of getting married, the stress, drama, and turbulence that affects your own sense of identity and your closest relationships. We are talking about what it means to be a bride and how to navigate this sacred time with more grace and ease. I'm your host, Kara Gassabay. As a life coach and therapist, I'm going to be sharing super practical tips so that you can not only rise to the occasion of your wedding, but also your life. Okay, hello, and welcome back. It's me, your host, Kara Gassabay, and you're listening to Whispers to a Bride. And today we are talking about the whole best day ever trope that is just all over wedding world, right? It's so funny. I'm re-recording this podcast because my normal podcast setup decided to forsake me after 112 episodes. And still, even the idea of doing it again, I never do things again, but even doing it again, I'm I really feel like this is such an important one. I've got my little 5-year-old under the table here, so hopefully we'll be good to go. Miss Rosebud is going to be nice and quiet for me. So this whole idea of taking a moment to bring this episode to you guys to just push pause and really let's think about this concept, this phrase that just seems to be everywhere, best day ever when it comes to wedding world, started from a recent conversation with one of my clients. And she was, a few months out from her wedding, and she just feels like it was not the best day ever. And so with that as the metric, she was having all kinds of feelings, as you can imagine anybody would when you go into something thinking it's going to be the best day ever. And then guess what? It wasn't. And again, nothing really bad or out of the ordinary happened. It's just that it's really hard for your wedding day to be the best day ever. And I think that even though we all know, well, that's kind of a lot of pressure and that's kind of ridiculous. And usually the best things don't come from a ton of pressure. There is a part of it that just seeps into the consciousness. And I think this idea of it being the best day ever is really embedded deep into the marketing. Even when it's not written all over the cocktail napkins and signage and all of that stuff, it's really in there every time you're spending more than you thought you would, or just working harder than you thought you would, having more conflict and drama, and just the wedding is a lot harder. I think the idea of best day ever kind of hooks you in that it's all going to be worth it. All the suffering is going to be worth it. All the pain, all the money, all the drama, it's going to be worth it because it's going to be the best day ever. And so in some ways that's great, motivating tactic, but also you can see how it's just a total setup for failure. It's a total just impossible standard to set. And I just think that we got to remember adding pressure to this day is not going to help us. There's already so much joy and excitement and complexity going into it. I just think that we don't need to make it about the best, especially when you think about not only just this idea of the intense pressure not lending itself. When you look back at your life and all of the very best moments, did you plan for them and spreadsheet them and Pinterest them and gather everybody around for them and orchestrate them? Or were they a little more spontaneous and organic, right? Some of the best things in our lives were unplanned and unscripted and caught us by surprise. I think that it's so important for your wedding to just put it in that context and let that idea of you want it to be a wonderful day. And so emotionally, you've got to go into it with this feeling of let myself be surprised. Let me see what happens. Let moments don't have to be the ones I orchestrated, but something else might pop up that is really special and makes it the best day ever in a way that you can't really have planned for. But going in thinking you can orchestrate and force or fund the best day ever, it's just a really hard thing to accomplish. And I just think we'd all be better served to just kind of put a little mental and emotional distance between that concept of the best day ever and that pressure and that whole thing, and how you're approaching it in your own mental space. Like, just put some distance. Again, I'm not saying you don't want it to be the best day ever and it can't be the best day ever, but like, let's just take a little of the pressure off. Because again, weddings are all about beginnings, right? You are into an entirely new chapter, right? You're going through sort of a threshold and leaving this one way of living and entering a different one, right? You're leaving one concept of family and expanding it and opening to a bigger sense of family and with lots of complications and people. And it's all your relationship with your friends is changing. Like, this is the kind of stuff we talk about all the time on this podcast. And beginnings are really hard. And just ask anyone who's had a baby. I can testify. That day, right, of a beginning is just, it's the best in some ways, but in other ways, it's just like, wow, it was really hard and it was really exhausting and it was really trying and it was really stressful and it was really overwhelming, right? And I think those are the feelings that a lot of brides end up feeling on their wedding day that they didn't anticipate and they didn't allow for. And they feel like that stuff stole the ability to have the best day ever, right? So all of the extra feelings that come with a new beginning and this big change, it's going to be both, right? I always say hold two things. It's going to be incredible and it's going to be challenging. It's going to be beautiful and it's going to be annoying. It's going to be joyful and it's going to be exhausting, right? There's going to be lots of like duality, lots of paradox there. And I think we just have to remind ourselves to make space for all of that because it's a new beginning and there's a lot of eyes on you. There's been a lot of buildup. The expectations are just so high in your own mind, the people around you. It's just very intense. And so I feel like that's the part too, just the actual intensity of it takes people a little by surprise because in their mind, the best day ever is like carefree, effervescent, effortless, just all joyful and ease and flow. And weddings are like a big logistical production and like things come up and there's people there and people do people things, right? Like things that you just thought everybody would be like their most perfect behavior. And then it turns out like people are just like people and like weird stuff happens. So I feel like it's just so important that we remember this idea of the best day ever just has such a like clean one note, right? Like a very consistent vibe of just perfection and fabulosity and just joy. And you're just like all giddy and happy the entire time. And that is just not how most people experience it. Most people feel like a lot of range of emotion, a lot of overwhelm, a lot of like, some people have a little disappointment because like the part that they planned so hard for, like the tablescape or like some kind of vintage car entrance or just like the thing that they really thought was going to like wow everybody. Maybe they didn't feel like it did what they thought it was going to do. And so they have like this confusion or disappointment, or the dancing didn't seem long enough, or they didn't just feel transported into a new identity in this like magical Disney way that they would feel like this validation and all of this stuff. Like there's just so much in people's minds going into it when they have this idea of best day ever. They're expecting to be like wowed in ways that are just like completely foreign to them. And I think that's just a setup. It's going to be you. It's going to be the girl it's always been going through like a very monumental, memorable, big experience that'll have a lot of different parts to it. And I think that if I can just give you any advice, it's just to let it be everything and let it be complicated and special and wonderful and not just the best. Because here's the thing. It might be true that it feels like the best day ever when you wake up. It might be true it doesn't feel like that, but when you look back 2 years from now, it'll feel like the best day ever. Maybe it'll never feel like the best day ever, but guess what? It doesn't have to. It doesn't need to. I think it's so important for me. I don't know about you, but like for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love the idea of just like, I'm keeping my best day in front of me. I don't even know what it is, but like, it just seems a little bit of a bummer to think that like it's behind you. And I think that was funny. That was a big part of this bride I was speaking to was just, she felt like if that was the pinnacle, right? Because she's one of those girlies like myself who had been really looking forward to this day since her childhood. So when you've been like ramping up for the best day ever for like 20 some years, and then all of a sudden it's over, it wasn't that impressive. And now it's over and there won't be another best day, like nothing will top that. That's going to set you up for some depressing days. So you can see how, and again, I think a lot of this stuff is really subconscious. We don't realize how much it's just been in the back of our mind that, like, on this day, we are just going to be so beautiful and fabulous and rich and loved and admired and graceful. And we just, right? We just, it's such that storybook picture in our mind that reality just is often really different and a little grittier. And that doesn't mean it's any less profound and beautiful and magical. And so that's just kind of what I want to leave you with. Instead of best day ever just being this sort of like one note flat, like intense high bar concept in wedding world, I want us to think about, what does it mean to you to have the best day ever? What does best even look like, right? Is best just mean like fancier than all of your friends? Does best mean most memorable, most transformative, most like loving, most significant, right? Like there's all these other ways to think of the best, right? The best decision you ever made happened on that day. The best in the sense that like it was the time where all the people you loved were together in the same room. That can just, for you, that could be the best. And I just think that that is how I want you to look at it. Just what do you mean by best day ever? Because when you don't get a little more specific, when you keep things so vague, it's really hard to know if you ever really got what you set out to get, right? When you keep things super, super vague like that, then you look back and you're like, well, did I get what I wanted? You're like, well, I didn't really say what I wanted, right? We even know that from like a kid making a Christmas list. It's like, did I get what I wanted? Well, I didn't make a list, so I don't know what I wanted. So I don't know if I really got it. And you can see how the disappointment can really creep in. So I'd love for you to be like, really think about what would make it the best day ever? What would make it the best day ever? And when you really think about it, it's often going to be those really tiny moments, and it'll be different for everyone. What really will make it the best for you? And the more you can really hone down and figure out what that is, you can be so much more intentional about creating that and experiencing that for yourself. Like that is the key. So let's get really specific and really creative about what does the best even look like. If you want to kind of manipulate that term for yourself and still use it. And you also have permission to like fully throw out the whole concept of best day ever, because like it can be a full just marketing mayhem, whatever. But this is your chance. I'm loving either way on this. Really get creative and redefine it and be expansive with it, or toss it to the wayside. But I want us all, even if you know you're not like, I'm not the cheesy girl who's like hashtag best day ever, but it's in your psyche. It's in there. So I just am like, let's dig it up, shake it out, see what it's really about for you, and then proceed with that much more intention and clarity, focus, and specificity, because that will save you. Okay. I hope that makes sense on my re-record. And I am wishing you guys nothing but bridal bliss. Until I talk to you again, find me on TikTok and reach out for your appointment. This is the kind of stuff, getting this sort of like emotional clarity and frameworks sort of set up, a little bit of like scaffolding for your heart and your mind as you're going into this very beautiful day, can go a long way. And of course, I'm always here on the after side, right? When you wake up and look back and try to process it all. So I'm here for you. Till next time, wishing you nothing but